Good morning, Madam President, members of Parliament, strangers in the gallery, and all men and women, boys and girls who are viewing. A reading from Isaiah 65, 17 to 25. For I am about to create new heavens and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered or come to mind, but be glad and rejoice forever in what I am creating. For I am about to create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in my people. No more shall the sound of weeping be heard in it, or the cry of distress. No more shall there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old person who does not live out a lifetime. For one who dies at 100 years will be considered a youth, and one who falls short of 100 will be considered accursed. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For like the days of a tree shall the days of my people be, and my chosen shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain, or bear children for calamity, for they shall be offspring blessed by the Lord, and their descendants as well. Before they call, I will answer. While they are yet speaking, I will hear. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together. The lion shall eat straw like the ox, but the serpent, its food shall be dust. They shall not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, says the Lord. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. Creator God, it is a new day, one of your creations which you have chosen to share with us. For that we are thankful. We ought to use this day for good, but we can only do so by your power. So we ask that by your grace you will grant us so to do. God of wisdom and might, this new day comes with choices and opportunities for all of us, from those within the walls of Parliament and on the seats of justice, from the person on the street to those in the supermarkets, from the expecting parents to the child on the playfield. Help us to make the right choices, not for ourselves, but for those yet unborn and those we may never meet. Lord God of all the nations, on this new day, we ask that you look in mercy on this Twin Island Federation of St. Christopher and Nevis, especially now as we celebrate 40 years of independence. As we meet in this special sitting of the Nevis Island Assembly, we remember before you those who have served in varying capacities and are now of blessed memory. We pray your blessings on those who have served and no longer do so for various reasons, and those who are serving now. Keep them high in their ideals, even as they keep their ears to the ground and their eyes fixed on you, that in the end we may indeed be a nation where peace abounds and build a Nevis that is nice naturally. In the name of Jesus, our Lord and soon coming King, we pray. Amen.
Please be seated. Motion for the approval of the order paper as circulated.
Madam President, I rise to move a motion for the adoption of the order paper as circulated.
Madam President, I rise to second that motion.
The question is that the order paper as circulated be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Messages from the Deputy Governor General.
There are no messages.
Announcements by the President.
Thank you. Honorable members of this House, ladies and gentlemen in the gallery, I wish you a pleasant morning, and I thank you for joining us here today on this time in our nation's history where we are celebrating 40 years of independence. I am grateful that you have considered it important to be here with us to mark this milestone. Today, we will have speeches being delivered by members of the Assembly as well as former members of the Assembly. Those speeches will be delivered up to a maximum time of 15 minutes. And so we ask your indulgence and your cooperation. The rules of decorum that usually apply continue to apply in today's sitting. Before we continue, I would just like to recognize the presence of a few persons who are here with us. I note the presence of the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, who is a member of the opposition in the National Assembly. I also note the presence of Mr. Farrell Smithen, former president of the Nevis Island Assembly. I also note the presence of the Honorable Mr. Joseph Parry, former Premier of the island of Nevis. Lady Sheila Daniel, widow of the Right Excellent Simeon Daniel, former Premier and the only national hero for the island of Nevis. And I hope I'm not overlooking any other person, but please forgive me if I do. I'd like to welcome you all here to our sitting this morning. At this time, I'd also like to say thanks to a few persons who made today's sitting possible, who assisted with preparation and logistics. Of course, to Miss Myra Williams and Aquila Maynard, clerk and junior clerk, for the preparations for today's sitting. They usually go over and beyond, and they have done a great job, and I'm grateful to them for that. Thank you also to our legal advisor, Mrs. Helene Lewis, for assisting in coordinating the sitting, Ms. Sherilyn Liebert in the Ministry of Community Development for ensuring the availability of chairs, seating for today's sitting, and Mr. Doval Drew for transportation of those chairs. We also had some persons who assisted with decoration and preparation of wreaths, Ms. Jamila Hobson, as well as Cornerstone for the decorations. NNC is usually with us to do broadcasting so that members of the general public who cannot be in-house with us can follow the proceedings. So we want to thank them for their loyalty and for being with us today. We're also grateful to Inspector Alonzo Carty, who arranged for transportation and who has arranged for logistics in terms of the wreath laying ceremony that will follow shortly hereafter, when wreaths will be laid at the bust of the Right Excellent Sir Simeon Daniel, that is at Main Street, Charlestown. That is the extent of the announcements. Thank you.
On the occasion of this special sitting of the Nevis Island Assembly in the commemoration of the 40th anniversary of St. Kitts and Nevis independence, I consider it a great honor to welcome to the podium the dignitaries in the same order as set out in the program to give brief remarks. I now call the Honorable Janelle Nisbet, nominated member in the Nevis Island Assembly, December 2022 to present.
Madam President, distinguished colleagues, honorable members of the opposition benches, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen of the gallery, listening audience online, good morning. Madam President, I rise with your leave on this, the special sitting of the Nevis Island Assembly in honor of the 40th anniversary of St. Christopher and Nevis as an independent nation. Today we gather to mark a momentous occasion. 40 years. 40 years of independence. It is a privilege and an honor to stand before you as a Minister of Health, Gender Affairs, and Social Empowerment. in the Nevis Island administration. Madam President, at the young but not so young age of 33, I do not have the privilege of taking our listening audience on a stroll down memory lane of a time before our great country hoisted its flag as an independent nation some 4 decades ago. Any testimonials given on my part would be based on what I read or listened to from those who came before me. Tales of walking miles to fetch water, kerosene lamps, and awestruck people describing newly installed lampposts as moon on a stick is reserved for those who lived it and helped to shape the progressive and rapidly developing country that those of us who came after are fortunate enough to embrace, enjoy, and enhance. Madam President, 4 decades ago, our nation embarked on its journey towards self-determination and sovereignty. Over the years, she has transformed from a stage of infancy to maturity. Much like humans, our 40s represent a time of peak productivity as we put all the lessons that we would have learned over the years to work. As a nation, we have weathered storms, both natural and economic, and emerged stronger each time. It was a path fraught with challenges, but nevertheless, one that those before me embraced with unwavering determination and resilience. And one which my generation and those to come remain committed to not only maintaining, but to advancing. Our resilience as a nation has been our greatest asset. It is a testament to the unwavering spirit of our people. As we celebrate our achievements, let us remember the sacrifices made by those who came before us and the vision that they had for our beloved Twin Island Federation. Madam President, as we reflect on our history, we must also look to the future. Our commitment to democracy, social justice, and economic prosperity remains unshaken. We will continue to invest in healthcare, education, and infrastructure to ensure a brighter future for all our citizens. Healthcare, as one of the pillars of our society, has played a crucial role in shaping the progress of our nation. The health of a nation is the wealth of a nation. Over the past 40 years, we have made significant advancements in healthcare. Our commitment to providing accessible, affordable, and high-quality healthcare services to every resident and visitor on the island of Nevis has been unwavering. Today, I want to reflect on the strides we have made in this vital sector and share our vision for the future. In 1909, the old government house that was also sometimes the temporary residence of the magistrate and referred to as the Queen's House was converted into a hospital and named for Queen Alexandra, wife of King Edward. Again in 1950 and 1951, earthquakes severely damaged the hospital. It was reconstructed by means of a generous grant from the government of the United Kingdom. In 2001, with a grant from the European Union, a new building was erected and to accommodate the accident, emergency, outpatient, and radiology departments. The existing structure was also completely refurbished. The 1909 and 1950s, Madam President, are those information that I read and learned from those who came before me. Today, as we continue to embark on yet another journey to enhance this key institution with the expansion of the Alexandra Hospital, this project will result in the relocation of some existing services into the new infrastructure. This will improve the working environment and workflow. Madam President, I highlighted earlier that over the years, our nation has faced many challenges, natural and economic in nature. This project has not escaped that. but we remain resilient, adaptive, and committed to maintaining and expanding our already high levels of services while we work diligently to bring this project to fruition. Our radiology and diagnostic departments, for example, have been significantly enhanced recently. Among other supplies and equipment, we've seen the recent addition of a state-of-the-art CT scan machine, one of only 3 of its kind in the region. A picture archiving system, PACS, that facilitates telemedicine and faster processing of scans for doctors has also been added just this year. Madam President, a mammogram machine was added to the complement just recently, and the equipment thus far has serviced 149 women to date. Madam President, I deviate only slightly to remind everyone, but particularly our women, that this mammography service has been made free of cost to you for the duration of the year. So until the end of 2023, the service is free of cost. And I want to take this opportunity and this platform to encourage each and every one of you to consult your doctor and get that diagnostic services. Early detection is the best form of prevention or cure. Madam President, next month is also Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so I hope that would stimulate even greater activity there. Madam President, I said all of that to say that our healthcare system has grown from strength to strength, with well-equipped facilities and a skilled healthcare workforce. However, as we celebrate our achievements, we must acknowledge the challenges that we face. The global pandemic that gripped the world since 2020 has tested our healthcare system like never before. We have faced difficult times, but I stand here today with pride to say that we have emerged stronger and more resilient. Our healthcare professionals are the true heroes of our nation, and they have worked effortlessly to safeguard the health and well-being of our people. Looking ahead, our vision for healthcare in St. Kitts and Nevis is clear. We will continue to invest in infrastructure, technology, and training for our healthcare workforce. We aim to enhance our capacity to respond to the health emergencies swiftly and effectively. Additionally, we are committed to improving access to healthcare services in every corner of our island through our top-tier community health centers, ensuring that no one is left behind. Furthermore, Madam President, the concept of social empowerment is closely intertwined with healthcare. We understand that a healthy society is an empowered society. We are dedicated to providing holistic, well-rounded. We are committed to, apologies, Madam President. We are dedicated to promoting holistic well-being, not just physical health, but also mental and social well-being as well. Initiatives to combat poverty, enhance education, and strengthen community ties are essential components of our vision for social empowerment. Through this department, Madam President, we offer a number of services which include food voucher assistance, our Vibrant Seniors Program, our RISE program, which is a family-oriented assistance program, Teen Mothers Program, a counseling unit that is free of cost for those experiencing mental health challenges to access. We have community development activities, skills training, and if I keep going, I will go over the 15-minute time slot. Madam President, within my ministry, we are committed to serving people from the cradle to the grave. Just this month, through the Department of Gender Affairs, we launched the Daycare Voucher Assistance Plan, dubbed Action Plan, assisted childcare for toddlers and infants on Nevis. As we celebrate this 40th anniversary, let us not forget that our independence is not merely a date on the calendar, but a living, breathing testament to the strength and unity of our people. Our progress in healthcare and social empowerment is a testament to what we can achieve when we work together for a common goal. Let us approach the future with hope and determination. Let us build on the legacy of those who fought for our independence and continue to strive for a healthier, more empowered St. Kitts and Nevis. Together we can overcome any obstacle and achieve greatness for our nation. May God bless our beloved St. Kitts and Nevis on this momentous occasion, and may our Twin Island Federation continue to thrive for generations to come. May it please you, Madam President.
I now invite our next dignitary, Honorable Troy Liburd, nominated member in the Nevis Island Assembly, March 2013, to present.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Madam President, members on this side, members on the opposite side, all in the gallery. Pleasant good morning to all. Madam President, with your leave, I rise on the occasion of this special sitting of the Nevis Island Assembly in celebration of the 40th anniversary of the independence of St. Christopher and Nevis. Madam President, I'm proud to be a citizen of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. I am proud to be a Nevisian. Our journey as a young nation has not been without its ups and downs. It has not always been smooth sailing. Time has proven, though, that we are a progressive people. We are a resilient people. We have been able to overcome numerous challenges on our journey through time as an independent nation. I want to quote my good friend, Mr. Kervin Benjamin, also called Infamous. In his song, he says, "As time rolls on and life goes on, be strong, and keep holding on." Madam President, I think it's very fitting that we have chosen to have a special sitting of the Nevis Island Assembly to mark the 40th anniversary of independence. Since, Madam President, the Assembly and the Nevis Island Administration are both creatures born out of independence. So while we celebrate independence, we also celebrate having the Nevis Island Assembly and the Nevis Island Administration. History tells us that Nevis had a local council very long time ago, and that council was abolished in 1883. I don't know if it's coincidence, but that's 100 years before our independence. In the ensuing years, Madam President, government was administered in one form or the other in Nevis from Bastille. I am not old enough to have experienced those days, but there are many stories, written and verbal, that speak to those times. And for those of us on this side of the Narrows, regardless of politics, this assembly and the NIA has been all the difference for us. Madam President, I want to be a bit more personal in talking about the independence journey. I want to speak from the eyes and experiences of somebody who was born just 2 years prior to independence, who would have been an infant during the infancy of the nation and would have grown up as the nation has grown. From those early days in the 80s, where fetching water from the dump in buckets or jugs was the reality of the day, where it was customary to look after animals in the early mornings before the sun came up. We learned at an early age how to fork, how to hoe, how to weed out plants, how to plant vine, and how to dig potatoes. I spent my earliest days, Madam President, growing up in Pan Hill. And in those days, in the village, you had about 3 televisions, and there was a phone by the doctor's office. Madam President, you know where the doctor's office was? That's over there on the hill now. I think we have the Pan Hill Community Center located. Highland? See? Somebody with more elderly knowledge is telling me. But that's where the Gingerland, the Pan Hill Community Center is now located. So there was a phone over there. Mr. Curtin, who lived on the other side of the road, he had a phone. And there was a phone at Hilltop Restaurant. Madam President, nowadays when people give me their phone numbers, I put the phone numbers in my phone and I do not remember them. So if I lose my phone, I don't have anybody's number. But if somebody were to stop me and ask me for the number for, let's say, Hilltop Restaurant, I would be able to rattle that number after them from my head. Because that was the first phone number that I knew. Because when family members used to call from overseas to speak to their sister, who was my grandmother, or one of my aunts, that's where we would go to take the phone call. So as a youngster, you would run down there between, you know, as they say, between people's legs, and you hope to get a little talk on the phone, because that was a big thing growing up in the early 80s. And when you wanted to watch television, Madam President, everybody used to crowd around one television in the village. So I got a little bit of that. Madam Minister who spoke before me said she missed out on it, but I got a little bit of it. Madam President, in those days, well, for me, one of the modes of transportation was we used donkeys and so on. You know, those of us who had livestock and we had to go to the pasture early in the morning, that was our mode of transportation. And when we didn't have donkeys, we used to run to the pasture and run, come back. I used to be very fast in those days. I know nobody could look at me now and tell, but you know, that's where the speed used to come from, because you had to go to the pasture in the morning. And I know we see the donkeys now roaming the street, and they are wild and they're all over the road, causing, in most cases, a nuisance. But back in those days, not everybody had a donkey, because not everybody could afford a donkey, because you had to buy them, because all of the donkeys had owners. You know, Madam President, if you went there and you saw a set of donkeys running wild, and you were brave enough to go and catch one, by the time you caught that donkey, somebody would be coming up to you and telling you, well, you got to pay them X amount, because that donkey belonged to them, and it come out of this donkey, or it come out of that donkey. And that is how life was in Nevis back in the early 80s. And so it must not be lost on us now where we are coming from, Madam President. If you contrast where we were in those days to where we are now, I think everybody would agree that we have come a very, very long way in Nevis and in the Federation as a whole. Madam President, I remember a long time ago, come to Charlestown as a child. I remember what Charlestown looked like before the port project, before Samuel Hunkins Drive was done and upgraded. I remember when there was no Long Point Road and there was no Long Point Port. And I remember what the airport used to look like before it was upgraded and renamed in honor of Vance W. Amry of blessed memory. So, Madam President, we have a lot to be thankful for. I, for one, Madam President, I'm not wanting for in respect for those who would have led the country in those 40 years from independence until now, and even in the years from before. There were great men and women, names such as Bradshaw and Simmons, Douglas, from Daniel here in Nevis, and Amry, who I just mentioned, and Parry, and I'm very happy to see the Honorable Joseph Parry here this morning, because they would have done a lot to bring the country to where we are today. Names such as Gishard, can't forget to mention him. And even in the modern day, Madam President, I would be remiss if I do not mention our very own Premier, who has fought so valiantly over the years for us here on Nevis. And these are persons to whom the country owes a debt of gratitude for the service and the hard work that they have put in to get us to where we are as leaders. But contributions to the country was not just limited to the leadership, but ordinary members of society have contributed greatly to the development of St. Kitts and Nevis as a federation. We look at all of the businessmen who have spent their life in private business and so on, our cricketers, our other athletes, our calypsonians, all those who have contributed to the development of the country, our teachers who would have taught in our schools over the years, all of them have had a big part to play in the development of Nevis and of the Federation as a whole. Madam President, regardless of political persuasion or any of those things, we must be willing and able and mature enough to come together as a people to show gratitude to all those who have contributed to us being where we are today. Our democracy, Madam President, and I'm timing myself so I don't go over the 15 minutes because I tend to talk a lot when I have the opportunity. Our democracy, Madam President, was founded on 5 pillars. If you go and you read the Constitution of St. Kitts and Nevis, it starts out by saying, we as the people of St. Christopher and Nevis declare that the nation is established on the belief in Almighty God and the inherent dignity of each individual. I think that is very important, that we know the fundamentals upon which the country was built. We assert that they are entitled to the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms, believe in the concept of true democracy with free and fair elections, desire the creation of a climate of economic well-being in the context of respect of law and order, and are committed to achieve their national objectives with a unity of purpose. Those were the fundamentals for the founding of the nation, Madam President. Madam President, the blessings in which we today rejoice, the rich inheritance of justice, liberty, prosperity, and independence, bequeathed to us by our forebears and shared by all of us, are to be cherished and jealously guarded. We have come a very long way in 40 years, Madam President. Our leaders of the past have done their tenure, and it is now for the leaders of today to step up to the plate to lead the country going forward. Madam President, we must ensure this generation of Nevisians and Kittitians are fully equipped and ready to flourish in this uber modern time. And so a focus on education using all modalities at our disposal is vital. Education, Madam President, is the most empowering force in the world. It creates knowledge, builds confidence, and breaks down barriers to opportunities. Technology, Madam President, while an amazing tool for building, could also be a very destructive weapon. We therefore must guard carefully what our children are exposed to at an early age. I believe that we as Kittitians and Nevisians have a lot for which we can rejoice and be glad. And there is hope for a future that can be even more successful. But we can only continue to progress if we pool our efforts. It will take the efforts of all of us working together. Madam President, what we need in St. Kitts and Nevis is not division, not hatred, not violence, not lawlessness, but love, compassion, wisdom, and a feeling of empathy and justice to those who are less fortunate. I want to end, Madam President, and I think I'm right on time, by quoting the great Crefton Warner, King Miko. God bless our country, bless our native land, grant us the courage to change the things that we can. May it please you, Madam President.
In the absence of the Honorable Cleon Simmons, I will now invite the Honorable Spencer Brand, elected member of the Nevis Island Assembly, January 2018, to present.
Madam President, good morning. I want to say a very special good morning to members on this side of the House, members opposite, our guests in the gallery, and especially the wife of our only national hero, Lady Sheila, and our former Premier, those who are listening and those who are viewing. Madam President, I rise to make my presentation at this special sitting of the Nevis Island Assembly on the 40th anniversary celebration of our independence. And I want to dub my presentation, Madam President, From Whence Have We Come? From whence have we come? In 1983, I was a second form student at the Charleston Secondary School. So I have an advantage over the two nominated members. And Madam President, I must say that at that very tender age, there was a lot of excitement in the atmosphere. There was a lot of uncertainty. But also, there was a lot of expectation, Madam President, on this milestone of becoming an independent nation amongst all of the nations in the world. So whence have we come, Madam President? The nominated member spoke about having to go and get water and donkey and all of that. And I smile because I believe that perhaps he may not have had the real experience of having to go and fetch water. You see, Madam President, in the 70s, we had to walk miles and miles to collect water before we go to school. And there was a particular head teacher at the Charlestown Boys' School by the name of Sandy Bonkampa. If you dare get to school late, you will receive a few lashes. Because he was not too concerned about how far you had to go for water. That was not his concern. His concern was that school start at 8:30. And Madam President, we had to leave Stony Grove and go to right there in front of the Charlestown police station, or right outside the gate here by the dam, or up in Hamilton before we can go to school and make sure that we had water. So whence have we come, Madam President? Madam President, in 2023, 40 years on, we have seen significant improvement in our water infrastructure. And I marvel, Madam President, that sadly, we still see many of our children are going to school late. Why? Madam President, whence have we come? We have seen the construction of new schools throughout the length and breadth of the island of Nevis in our 40 years of independence. The Charlestown Primary School, the VOJN Primary School, the Elizabeth Pemberton Primary School, all of these schools, Madam President, in our 40 years of experience. We have seen, Madam President, the expansion of our sixth form college, an institution that came about, I believe it was 1980, and that has transformed the island of Nevis, Madam President. Madam President, in our 40 years of independence, we have seen the Bank of Nevis that has transformed, Madam President, the lives and the livelihoods of many Nevisians at home and abroad. Madam President, we have seen the construction of many hotels on the island of Nevis. Some may argue, perhaps not enough. We have seen, Madam President, the advancement and the inclusion of the Four Seasons Resort, Paradise Beach, Mount Nevis, all of which, Madam President, in our 40 years of independence. And these properties, Madam President, have transformed the lives and the livelihoods of Nevisians. We have seen, Madam President, the construction of the Long Point Port facility. And as a child growing up in Charlestown, I remember the days, Madam President, when we are on the pier and we will have containers flying over our heads. We have separated that, Madam President, with the construction of the Long Point Port facility. We have seen, Madam President, the construction of the water taxi facility. And all of us know that in the early days, we had to catch Sakara and Pioneer to go to St. Kitts. And if your heart was not strong enough, Madam President, somebody would be wiping up after you because of the mess that you would make. And Madam President, we have advanced in our independence as it relates to the travel between our two island states. We have seen, Madam President, the construction or the introduction of a number of businesses here on the island of Nevis. Rams, Hosfords, the expansion and the modernization of TDC, Value Mart, Madam President. All of these have come to the shores of Nevis in our 40 years of independence. We have seen, Madam President, countless small businesses and medium-sized business that continue to create employment for the people of Nevis. Madam President, in our 40 years of independence, our cricketers have graced the world stage in Test and in One Day, and they have done well. Some may argue, Madam President, that their tenure at the Test level or at the One Day level may not have been as long as we would have liked, but they made their presence felt, Madam President, and have done us proud. Madam President, in our 40 years of independence, we have seen numerous housing projects throughout the length and breadth of Nevis. We are ordinary Nevisians can say to the world that they now have and own their own home, Madam President. And the pride and the joy that they would have felt from owning their own home. And the Minister of Housing is whispering to me that the houses are of very good quality. Indeed, Madam President. Madam President, in our 40 years of independence, we have placed at the Olympics one of our most precious sons, Mr. Kervin Wallace. And in our 40 years of independence, Madam President, St. Kitts and Nevis have attained the honor of being the world champion in the 100 meters, Madam President. In 40 years, Madam President. Madam President, in our 40 years of independence, we have seen significant infrastructure development in roads, in water, in electricity, Madam President. And I remember those days, the honorable member spoke about what? Moon on a stick? Madam President, I smile at that term, Madam President, because I remember those very dark days, Madam President. As a young boy growing up in Stony Grove, the place was dark. It was dark, Madam President. And I like the terminology, moon on a stick, because we have come out of that dark age, so to speak, Madam President. Madam President, we have seen St. Kitts and Nevis on the world stage in the CONCACAF Gold Cup playoffs. Young nation, small population, limited resources. But Madam President, has it all been smooth sailing? I believe, Madam President, that it has not all been smooth sailing. We have had to wrestle with crime. We have had to wrestle with crime. And if we are to be honest, we must take the good and also take the bad. We have had to wrestle with crime. At times, Madam President, we have had to wrestle with certain social issues that confront every government in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. We have had to wrestle, Madam President, with natural disasters, hurricanes such as Hugo, and we have literally had to rebuild the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis after Hurricane Hugo. But Madam President, what will be in store for us for the next 40 years? And Madam President, if God is so good to me, in the next 40 years, I will be, what, 93 years. The age of my mother at this time. She's 93. And if I am so blessed, Madam President, with such longevity as my mother is now at 93, what can we expect? What is the vision? Where do we want to be in 40 years, Madam President? And while we ask the question, from whence have we come? we must also ask the question, where do we want to be in 40 years? Madam President, for me personally, I would hope that I can walk onto a plane at Vance W. Army International and walk off at JFK or at Heathrow. Madam President, I would hope that within the next 40 years, as we are now plugging in our phones to charge overnight, that I can be so fortunate to be able to plug in a vehicle and drive off in the morning after it has been charged, because we now have geothermal energy on the island of Nevis. I would like, Madam President, that within the next 40 years, we can sit, perhaps in my twilight years, and look out over the harbor and see a nice cruise ship docked for our taxi drivers and our businesses to enjoy the benefits, Madam President, of our hospitality. Madam President, in the next 40 years, I would like to see that Nevis and St. Kitts, perhaps not necessarily the Olympics, but World Championship Games, right over there at Long Point, being held. Facilities such that it can accommodate it, Madam President. Madam President, I would like to see that within the next 40 years, the south coast of Nevis is a new and transformative development for all Nevisians to enjoy. Madam President, I am hoping that while we celebrate in this 40th anniversary of independence, and we ask the question, from whence have we come? We must thank those men and women who would have laid the foundation for us, many of whom would have made tremendous sacrifices, Madam President, many of whom would have had to leave the comfort of their home and their families to secure what we are now enjoying today. And I want, Madam President, to say to our children, the second form student there at the Charlestown Secondary School or the Gingerland High School, the grade 6 student at the VOJN Primary School, the sixth form student there at our sixth form college, that you must take ownership of the development of our country. They must, Madam President. All of us on this side will vacate the stage at some point. Those on the other side, Madam President, will vacate the stage at some point. But I want to say to our children, they must take ownership of the development of our country. The hard work and the dedication and the commitment of men and women before them must not go to waste. Madam President, I want to say to the peoples of St. Kitts and Nevis, happy 40th anniversary of independence. And I trust that God, in his love and his mercy, will continue to bless these two beautiful islands. I believe that our Creator God, Madam President, spend a bit more time on St. Kitts and Nevis. In its uniqueness, let us cherish it. Let us do not allow anyone to define who we are. We must be able to define who we are as a people. Let us continue to enjoy the celebration But also, Madam President, let us look to the future with a sense of hope and purpose. With those few words, Madam President, may it please you.
I now invite our next dignitary, the Honorable Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, elected member in the Nevis Island Assembly, December 2022, to present.
Madam President, good morning to you. I paused for a minute because the podium for the opposition is usually not in this location. And of course, I would want to engage the members in the gallery. Nonetheless, Madam President, I bid you good morning, and good morning to the honorable members present, to all in the gallery, and to all viewing and listening. Allow me, Madam President, to acknowledge also the presence of Lady Sheila Daniel and former Premier of Nevis, Honorable Joseph Parry. I rise, Madam President, to make a contribution to the discussion in this honorable House in recognition of the 40th anniversary of independence under the theme, Growing Sustainably, Developing Maturely, and Building Resiliency, Independence 40. Madam President, September 19th is the anniversary date of our country's independence. But I do believe that this special sitting today, on September 29th, in this honorable House, is warranted and necessary to celebrate the significance of the 40th anniversary of independence and also the 40th anniversary of the Nevis Island Assembly and the Nevis Island Administration. Madam President, I note the flag to your on this side of you, and I take great pride in wearing that flag because it is a symbol of the autonomy that the Nevis government attained when home rule came back to Nevis along with our independence. Madam President, as I reflect upon the profound determination and courage of the great stalwarts of the Nevis Reformation Party that gave life to the Nevis Island Assembly, I am filled with a sense of pride and gratitude. These sentiments, Madam President, are shared by so many Nevisians who understood then and understand now that with God in our midst, the people of Nevis can work hard to achieve and to build a strong local economy and a self-reliant Nevis. Madam President, a quick look in the history books would reveal that prior to independence in 1983, the socioeconomic conditions in Nevis were untenable, and those poor conditions were the cause of strong political tensions between St. Kitts and Nevis. We are here today, Madam President, because of the leaders who put country above self and made the necessary compromises to advance our country. Madam President, having negotiated and achieved certain exclusive legislative and administrative powers, the Nevis Reformation Party, then led by the late Right Excellent Dr. Sir Simeon Daniel, my father, and Nevis's only national hero, worked tirelessly with a group of like-minded persons to transform the socioeconomic landscape in Nevis. The Nevis Reformation Party delivered to the people of Nevis new hope for a better Nevis. Major development initiatives, including the Four Seasons Resort Hotel, the Mount Nevis Hotel, and the Bank of Nevis Limited, were realized, not just imagined. In addition to the tourism sector, financial services, agriculture, and education were developed as the foundation on which to build a thriving economy in a self-reliant Nevis. Today, Madam President, these are the same pillars upon which Nevis's economy still depends. At some point, Madam President, change demands that we adjust to our challenging times. Change demands that we diversify our economy to deal with the challenges of the present day. Madam President, hard work, self-reliance, and self-determination were and continue to be the ethos of the NRP, the ethos of Nevis, and that ethos is what would make Nevis resilient. NRP, resilience, and self-determination go hand in hand. Without direction, Madam President, without a desire to be self-reliant, even Usain Bolt, who runs as fast as he can, without direction, would not finish first. Madam President, when the Concerned Citizens Movement entered government in 1992, Nevis was nice, as King Miko said. However, CCM maintained a status quo, and it was not until NRP returned to government in 2006, led by Premier Parry, who navigated Nevis through the global financial crisis of 2007 and 2009, that the people of Nevis saw more fundamental development to advance Nevis's economy and social well-being. The CCM returned to government from 2013 to present, and unfortunately, the status quo resumed. This brief historical context is important, Madam President, because as we celebrate 40 years of independence and 40 years of the Nevis Island Assembly, in the context of growing sustainably, developing maturely, and building resiliency, it helps us to understand that having a vision of self-reliance is critical to the economic development of Nevis and to St. Kitts and Nevis. Growing sustainably, Madam President, means that we must develop a legislative framework to attract foreign direct investment and stimulate the development of Nevis. A quick review of the ordinances passed in this honorable House indicates that the usefulness of this autonomy has been neglected in recent years. Growing sustainably, Madam President, means that we must exercise fiscal responsibility and not squander our resources. We cannot begin roads and leave them undone to be rebuilt again. We cannot start developments and leave them undone to start again. We cannot continue, Madam President, to service high interest loans and a high public debt of more than $500 million without creating new revenue streams. We cannot depend on taxing our hard-working people in an effort to balance the budget, Madam President, forcing our struggling families to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet at the end of each month. Growing sustainably, Madam President, means that we create decent jobs for our people and protect our vulnerable brothers and sisters and children. Growing sustainably means that we work hard to be self-reliant. Developing maturely, Madam President, means that we put country above self. It means that for the benefit of our people, we do not abandon projects simply because they are started by a different government or a different administration. Developing maturely, Madam President, means that we operationalize our equipment, such as dialysis equipment, rather than let them rot because they were not purchased by your government. Developing maturely, Madam President, means that you do not squander a $40 million fisheries complex because it was not negotiated under your government. Developing maturely, Madam President, means that you put favoritism, petty name calling, and vindictiveness aside and create an environment where togetherness and love prevail over divisiveness and hate. Madam President, we must build resiliency in an ever-changing world, full of uncertainties, global threats, and technological advancements. Developing geothermal energy to minimize reliance on fossil fuels and to reduce the cost of electricity is critical to the development and resiliency of Nevis. Too much time, Madam President, has been wasted on futile negotiations, and it is long overdue for the Nevis Island administration to give geothermal energy and renewable energy the priority attention that they deserve. Since the development of the wind farm in Madden's estate under the NRP administration, there has been no advancement of solar or wind energy by the CCM government. No matter what the CCM imagine, they just find it impossible to deliver for the benefit of the people. Small businesses still struggle with high electricity bills. Our people must continue to work tirelessly in order to make ends meet. More importantly, Madam President, we must provide a reliable supply of water for human use as well as for agricultural use. Water is life, Madam President. It is not a mere buzzword. Our food security and our hospitality industry are dependent on water. It is incredible, therefore, Madam President, to note that the CCM government has not dug a single well during its time in government, and that the last well dug in Nevis was by the Nevis Reformation Party in 2008. Madam President, we must understand what it means to build resiliency, and as I said before, resiliency, hard work, and NRP go hand in hand. Madam President, with no advancement in renewable energy, no advancement in the production of water, no advancement in tertiary education since the establishment of the Nevis Sixth Form College in 1980 by the NRP, our people continue to struggle. Our students are at a disadvantage, having to travel over to CFBC without the necessary assistance from the government to ensure that the playing field is level for our students who must travel to St. Kitts for their studies. Madam President, socioeconomic conditions in Nevis are regressing. Nevis is heading in an undesirable direction, and I trust that this 40th anniversary of independence, under the theme Growing Sustainably, Developing Maturely, and Building Resiliency, would serve as a new starting point or a reset for the economic development of Nevis. Madam President, now more than ever, Nevis needs new leadership and a new direction. The Nevis Reformation Party, Madam President, which I am humbled and honored to lead at this time, has a vision. The Nevis Reformation Party has a vision where our people can live in harmony once again. A vision where the people of Nevis can benefit from the uniqueness of our Constitution and the diversity of our country. We must build an integrated society and develop Nevis as a model island of sustainability and good governance. This vision, Madam President, is aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the Sustainable Island States Agenda advanced by Prime Minister Drew for the overall sustainable development of our country. Noteworthy, Madam President, is that the principles of democracy, equality, and inclusivity are fundamental to the development of a sustainable country. Building resiliency to the impacts of climate change is also critical to the development of a sustainable country at this point in time, Madam President. Madam President, when our leaders embrace our motto, country above self, when our leaders have a vision that is shared by the masses, Madam President, when our leaders remember that we are servants of the people and servants of God, when we can respect each other and trust each other, the people of Nevis and the people of St. Kitts and Nevis could look forward to the next 40 years and many more years after as a sustainable, mature, and resilient St. Kitts and Nevis. Madam President, I bid a happy 40th anniversary to our country, to our people, and most importantly, we thank God for giving us the mercies and the grace to be able to stand here. We hope that He would provide to us the strength and the guidance that is needed, that we can live in peace and harmony for the years that He grants us here on earth. May it please you, Madam President.
I now invite our next dignitary, the Honorable Evelyn, elected member in the Nevis Island Assembly, January 2018, to present.
Madam President, I rise on the occasion of the special sitting of the Nevis Island Assembly for the 40th anniversary of independence to make my brief presentation. Madam President, let me at the onset heartily congratulate and salute the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis on this milestone 40th anniversary of independence. As we celebrate, we have much to be thankful for and much to be proud of. I must also commend all of us for the exceptional national pride that has been exhibited during our celebrations. We witnessed an outpouring of love for country like we have never seen in previous independence celebrations. What warmed my heart most was the overwhelming display of national pride in our school children, both at the primary and the secondary levels, Madam President. I must also congratulate all for the maturity with which we have conducted ourselves during the celebrations. Madam President, as a nation, we have achieved so much over the past 40 years, and it may probably take 40 hours or maybe 40 days to recount our numerous accomplishments that all of us as citizens and residents of St. Kitts and Nevis should be happy to identify with. As an independent nation, we have made significant strides in every possible area. We have come a very long way in education, in our infrastructure, in our delivery of health care, in electricity generation, in water services, in agriculture, in housing, in culture, in the advancement of our tourism product, in our social safety net programs, in sports, in youth development, in information technology, in disaster management. Need I say more? Not only have we grown in leaps and bounds in these areas, but we are actually leading in the region in some of them. Madam President, do we think that it is by chance that so many of our Caribbean brothers and sisters are now making St. Kitts and Nevis their home? Certainly not. It is because of the fast pace of our advancement why we have witnessed this. I want to take this opportunity, Madam President, to pay homage to all of our past prime ministers and premiers for their outstanding efforts in leading St. Kitts and Nevis during the past 40 years of nationhood. Their work has certainly borne fruit, which we are now enjoying today. Even though our achievements have been countless, Madam President, we have had probably more than our fair share of challenges. We have experienced several hurricanes and storms that have decimated our agriculture industry and devastated our Twin Island state. If these storms have not been enough, in recent times we have witnessed extreme weather patterns resulting in severe droughts and excessive rainfall, resulting in, on one hand, in water shortages, and on the other hand, in severe damage to our infrastructure. Madam President, climate change is real, and we here in the Federation are at the receiving end of its devastating impacts. Our peace and tranquility have been marred on numerous occasions, thus seeing our crime rate escalate at times to the point of being called the murder capital of the world. If all of this have not been enough, Madam President, our nation, like all others in the world, had to withstand the rigors of the COVID-19 pandemic, which almost grounded our economy to a halt for 2 long years. This, of course, rendering tourism, our mainstay, almost useless. But alas, this land of beauty, the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, has bounced back on every occasion. And let me stress, not only bounced back, but has rebounded stronger on every occasion. This is a nation whose hallmark is resilience, hence our innate ability to always rise irrespective of the difficulties. It is important to note, however, that at all times, Madam President, we have done it together. We have weathered the storm together. We have overcome our challenges together. We have always rebuilt together. All of what we have accomplished as an independent nation, we have done it together. It is clear then, Madam President, that nation building is not the responsibility of the Governor General, nor that of the Deputy Governor General, nor does it belong to the Prime Minister, nor the Premier. It is a civic duty that belongs to all of us. So as we look towards the next 40 years, what should we do to ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis remains on the path of stability and sustained growth? I would want for a moment to say a few words to our youth, as you are our future leaders, and who would be at the helm of government as we progress to the next 40 years of independence. I'm encouraging all to respect our flag, respect our national anthem, and to stand at attention when you hear it being played. Display national pride in everything that you do. I'm encouraging you to stay focused and always be ready to seize any opportunities that are available to you and be prepared to take up the mantle of leadership. Get involved in the affairs of our country, your country. Get out of your comfort zone and be an integral part of building our nation. Do not be afraid to get involved in politics and be a part of the conversations regarding our federation. You must have a say in the future of the nation, your future. Madam President, the advice to our young people is pertinent to all age groups, and therefore I call on all citizens and residents to get involved in whatever small way you possibly can. We need all hands on deck. I remind us all that our human capital still remains our most precious resource. On a personal note, Madam President, I commit to continue doing my part to ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis remains one of the most vibrant destinations in the region and in the world. as a minister in the Nevis Island administration, I recommit to building the portfolios that I hold responsibility for, which include agriculture, marine resources, cooperatives, housing, lands, culture, and natural resources. Of course, Madam President, it is an indisputable fact that here in Nevis, we have revolutionized agriculture and housing in particular, and we will certainly continue on that path. In building these sectors, Madam President, we will grow the economy, we will grow the island of Nevis, and we will certainly grow the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. As we continue to celebrate this milestone, I call on the Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Terence Drew, and the Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Dr. Mark Brantley, to continue to collaborate, to continue to work together for the good of the Federation and all its citizens and residents. We are in this together. So let's never lose sight of that. According to the words of King Conris, let us on this, our 40th independence anniversary, take the oath. Take the oath to love our country. Take the oath to build our country. Take the oath to respect our national symbols. Take the oath to unite for the good of the nation. And take the oath to work together to keep our nation on the path of stability. So as we continue to celebrate and bask in the glory of our 40th anniversary of independence, let us with confidence, Madam President, and renewed hope, look towards the next 4 decades of continued growth. Let us together build a land of beauty and a country where peace abounds. Let us be guided at all times by our motto, country above self. That momentum that we have for the 40th anniversary, let's increase it and bring even more zeal and enthusiasm to our 41st anniversary and beyond. 3 cheers to the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. May God continue to favor and bless St. Kitts and Nevis and all of us. Happy 40th anniversary of independence, St. Kitts and Nevis. May it please you, Madam President.
I now invite our next dignitary, the Honorable Joseph Parry, who served as Premier of Nevis during the period July 2006 to January 2013.
With your permission, Madam President, I rise to speak on the 40th anniversary of the independence of St. Kitts and Nevis. I must congratulate the nation, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, for these 40 years. 40 years of hard work, 40 years of knowing that we have to depend on ourselves and not on anybody else. So many years ago, I sat in this building, in the gallery. There was so much hope and so much pride and so much expectation. The mace that we have here was done by Samuel Hunkins. Mr. Daniel worked very hard to ensure that we had a mace, and we had a parliament decked out in the mahogany and in the grandest style of Nevis. I remember the members who sat in the assembly, Julian Nisbet, a graduate of the grammar school then, and a businessman on the island, a nominated member. Victor J. Martin, still in the 20s, a scholar, a state scholar, who did political science at the University of the West Indies at Mona, Jamaica. Levi Morton, who, by the way, became a member of NRP in a very strange situation. For some reason, he was asked to take the set over to Fountain for a meeting, and when nobody turned up, Levi, who was only asked to deliver the set, held a whole meeting at Fountain, and thus became a member of the Nevis Reformation Party. He was a cultural icon, very much involved in trade and development. And I must say he's one of those who suffered most among all these members, because I think he lost his family as a result. That is what politics can do to you when you make a serious commitment to your country and to your people. Arthur Evelyn. Arthur Evelyn did not have to get involved in politics. The Evelyn family, in its own right, had lands, estates, and he had made himself a self-made man in Charlestown. He was married into a major family in Nevis and in Charlestown. But Arthur Evelyn loved his country, and he too decided that he will work with members of the NRP to help to move this country in the right direction, and therefore he was among them. An honest man, a quiet man, a kind man, a lover of Nevis. Uriel Swanston. Many of us who are here today and those who are listening know Uriel Swanston. Mr. Swanston was a young man involved in taxing from Gingerland, involved in business. He started with Ivor Stevens in their own party, and he eventually helped to form the Nevis Reformation Party. He was a man of passion, a man who believed that we should work towards building Nevis, helping the people of Nevis. He, with his wife and family along with him, was able to make great sacrifices. There are those of us who remember the days of the army on the island of Nevis, from St. Kitts, of course, and they used to camp on Mr. Swanston's gallery in Gingerland. It must have been very terrifying for those young children growing up to see the pressure that they were placed under and their father was. But Mr. Swanston never gave up. He never moved back. He never surrendered. He was not afraid. He will go to the parliament in St. Kitts and he will challenge the champion of St. Kitts, Bradshaw. He was not afraid to do that. And Mr. Swanston, in the end, helped the Nevis Reformation Party to prevail and was able to make his contribution on this island. One of the things I remember about Uriel Swanston in cabinet, he could tell you where every pipeline ran. He could tell you what reservoir was working and which one was not working. He knew the whole system. He understood the power plant. He knew about electricity. He was totally committed and a man whom I have the greatest respect. I would say that if you speak of a champion, if you speak of a man who stood out for his country and his people, Uriel Swanston should be given that honor. And then Ivor Stevens. Ivor Stevens, whose roots go back as far as the BVI, who was born in Sandy Point, who grew up in St. Kitts, who served in the Canadian Army in the Second World War. Those of us who know Ivor would often see him take out a big, long knife and begin to work on his fingernails. I think in the World War, that knife saved his life. We would not go into the details of how, but it saved his life. The Canadians fighting at Alamein, many times that regiment was destroyed or near destroyed. Many times facing Rommel, the great German general, the Desert Rat as he was called. Ivor was there, and Ivor survived because he was a survivor. He too did not have to get into politics, but he did. In 1957, against the might of Eugene Walwyn, and for many years he lost. But in the end, Eugene disappeared, and Ivor survived and helped us to get independence. And finally, of course, Mr. Daniel, Dr. Simeon Daniel. How many of us realize that Mr. Daniel was not interested in politics? He actually tried to get away from Ivor and from Swanston and all those who went to his house to get him to be involved in politics. In those days, it was believed that you had to be a lawyer to lead. A lawyer to lead because you had to talk. And so Mr. Daniel was pressured, and he eventually surrendered and became the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party. Mr. Daniel suffered considerably. The story is told that the government then moved into his legal office and stripped it. They found some reason to strip his legal office. And it was only because Earl Swanston and Ron Liebert went into the office and claimed 2 typewriters as their own. Mr. Daniel was not left with nothing at all in his legal office. When you think of that day, and when you think of these men, you understand what it is to sacrifice. You understand the pressures of the day. You would realize that in 1975, the then Premier of St. Kitts and Nevis, Mr. Bradshaw, had permission to move into independence. And only Nevis stood between him and that independence. You'd realize that in 1979, when they went to Britain, Mr. Bradshaw was already dead and Limo was in charge. They were told that St. Kitts and Nevis will go into independence, and 18 months after, they could have a referendum. It seemed at that time that the referendum would have been held in the 2 islands of St. Kitts and Nevis. Can you imagine if you had a referendum to decide whether Nevis should separate from St. Kitts, with 2/3, with Kittitians voting and Nevisians voting, what would have happened? It was a period of desolation. I remember very well because that meeting was held on Saturday morning at Mr. Daniel's office. And I was by Fred Nisbet's grocery looking up. And when I heard them speak, I said, wow, this is the end. There is nothing here. They have nothing to say. And I made a move then to leave Nevis. I actually applied to CXC and was successful in going to CXC. But then came the 1980 election. Pam and the NRP formed the government, and Dr. Simmons said to Mr. Daniel, tell Parry he must make up his mind whether he wants to be a permanent secretary or he wants to go to Barbados. I thought about it, not very long. I had a wife, a young wife and 2 children, and I told myself, stay home, and I did. And that's why I'm here today. I was able to work with these men to try to build Nevis for a government. And I say this because in 1980, there was very little on the island of Nevis. Previous speakers have already outlined the state of Nevis. The one thing I would like to say, I never heard any Nevisians say that they had moonlight on a stick. That came from Anguilla. Never heard any Nevisian say that. So let us forget that. That's a Kittitian joke about Anguillans. Maybe they never even said it. But we know the state in those days. I don't want to repeat too much. I just want to say that Craddock Road, Cotton Ground, Jessops, Barnscott, Bath Village, Brown Hill, Church Ground, those areas especially can tell you about water. Quite often, water was turned on maybe about 5 o'clock in the morning, and 7 o'clock in the morning it was gone. If you didn't bathe then, you had problems unless you had buckets with water in your home. It was that bad. I remember in December of 1980, the airport was lighted for the first time. That plane that took Ivor Stevens and Simeon Daniel and Ural Swanston that landed on the airport under the lights for the first time, it was such a great pride and a privilege. Hundreds of persons, I think it was a Christmas Eve, hundreds of persons were there to see that event. And again, I was fortunate to be on that plane when we first landed at the airport there at Newcastle. You had electricity, very little electricity. Telephones in a mess. Nevis was desperate. And between 1980 and 83, we went to work, led by Dr. Simeon Daniel, of course. Although he was in St. Kitts, he spent a lot of time in Nevis because, as he said to me, I prefer to work in Nevis than in St. Kitts. And so much work was done that by 1983 September, we had a civil service. We had permanent, they were not called permanent secretaries, they were called chief administrators. We had assistant secretaries. We had ministries. You had the Ministry of Agriculture, you had the Ministry of Communications, and you had the Premier's Ministry. Of course, you had your government, the House of Assembly. You had your members of the House of Assembly, and you had the Premier and his cabinet. To me, that was the greatest achievement. After 100 years, government came back to Nevis. We are not speaking about local council, because the local council was just a sop. But a government that could make laws, a government that could ensure that water is in the country, a government that could make policies for agriculture and for tourism, a government that could administer health and education, a government of which the people of Nevis can be proud, or could be proud. In the old days, if you wanted a birth certificate, you had to go to St. Kitts. You could get it now. Maybe some of those persons who drowned on that boat on the 1st of August 1970 had reason to go to St. Kitts for some little foolishness that they shouldn't have gone for and lost their lives. All those things operated in our minds. And from that position, it was decided that we had the capacity and the capability to run government, and that we would run it. And if you look at 40 years, you would see the difference that a government in Nevis has made for the people of this country. I must mention that in the preparation, of course, for us, the sixth form was very important. The sixth form, the Nevis sixth form, hundreds of persons have graduated from that sixth form. As I look around, I see persons who have graduated from the sixth form sitting right here in the House of Assembly. Started in 1980. Can you imagine that in 1965, when I went to sixth form in St. Kitts, that only Van Samery, myself, and my first wife, Rosalind Warner Parry, were able to go. That there were others, but Nevis was limited. And when we went to St. Kitts to find out that people who did not have the same qualifications as some of our friends were in sixth form, but they had to repeat or had to go to work and could not go into the sixth form. So in 1980, a sixth form was established, and that sixth form has served Nevis well. You have seen people who are in charge of companies like TDC. You have people like Bal Rollins, and I deliberately mention his name because I owe a debt of gratitude to him for the service he has done for me. You have had so many persons, lawyers, electricians, who have benefited from the sixth form. And the purpose of the sixth form, to ensure that Nevis had the kind of persons who could run the island and help to run the island. You had secondary education for all, the first in the OECS. You had the Carib Queen. Now, many of you would say the Carib Queen. What is the significance of the Carib Queen? If you were alive back in 1967, 68, 69, 1970, you would realize that when you traveled in the Christina, you were traveling between pigs and sheep and goats and cattle. You could slide in the mess that was left behind. You could not dress to go to a function in St. Kitts in those days. You had to walk with your clothes. And then when you reach St. Kitts, you would change. The Carib Queen was the first boat. Some people talk about the Sampan and the Silapana. But the Carib Queen was the first boat where you could dress properly on Nevis and go to St. Kitts on a function. So that made a difference. Then, of course, you had the Development Bank, a branch of the development brought over to Nevis. When you put all these things together, you could see the purpose was to make yourself ready for independence and a government on the island of Nevis. And that came on the 19th of September, 1983. And when you look at the achievements of that government in such a short time, you realize the hard work, dedication, and influence of these men. Financial services. Today, the Financial Services Division is one of the key elements of economic development on the island of Nevis. The name of Bill Barnard and John Tansey resonate in the heads of some of us. Cecil Byron was able to introduce Dr. Simeon Daniel to these men, and he, realizing the importance of financial services, found a way to attract these men to Nevis with the company of the corporate services. Interestingly, there was I again in Washington, sitting with these men along with Bobby Liebert, trying to work out some kind of law for the starting of the financial services on Ireland. We have to give great credit to Mr. Daniel, because through his initiative and through his contacts, we have today the Nevis financial services industry. The Four Seasons Hotel. Again, I remember very well Raspo and his colleague Bouvelet from Dumez in France came to me as permanent secretary. I was surprised. And when I looked at them, I wondered if these were serious people, because they did not dress like wealthy people. They were just there like two small birds sitting in two chairs in front of me, very humbly, and saying that they wanted to start a hotel on the island of Nevis. And then they came back a second time. And I said to Mr. Daniel, you know what? You need to see these men, because I can't do any more with them. And so Mr. Daniel got him involved, and today we have the Four Seasons Hotel, one of the leading hotels still in the Caribbean. The Four Seasons revolutionized Nevis economically. Some things were good, and some were not so good. The good parts were that women for the first time, were able to work monthly, weekly. The bad thing was that many of these women abandoned their boyfriends because they no longer needed them. And that's a fact. The other thing was the churches suffered because people had to work on Sundays. And that began the decline of the churches. It's important that I say these things because church is important. Religion is absolutely important. And we need to find a way to get our people back to the churches. We need to find a way to get our children to attend church. Some of the poor discipline and problems that we have today is because they're not getting the type of training anymore. And so I deliberately mention it. The Bank of Nevis. This was a private enterprise by Mr. Daniel. He bullied the federal government into allowing a license to be granted for the Bank of Nevis. And then he had to go around and find 10 men and women, 10 persons, let me change that, 10 persons, to give $25,000 each. So he was able to start the bank with $250,000. These men and women, again, are heroes. They're stalwarts. Some of them were ordinary people. Mr. Nichols' daughter, Dolores. Of course, we had Bob Griffith, and we have the Yarwoods, they were involved. You had Spencer Howell was involved. Mr. Brantley was involved. That is Mark Brantley's father. And all these men got together to start this bank. Today, the Bank of Nevis is a powerhouse on the island of Nevis and has served so many people in so many ways that we have to congratulate Dr. Simeon Daniel for his vision and his persistence during that period between 1983 and 85. And then the Nevis Housing Corporation.
Mr. Parry, sorry to interrupt your presentation. You've exceeded.
I'm running out of time?
So if you can wrap up, please. Yes.
How much time do I have?
You had 15 minutes, which
I've already used it up.
Yes, so if you can wrap up your
presentation.
presentation.
Okay, give me 3 minutes. The Nevis Housing Corporation. That was interesting because the fellows in St. Kitts had lands to sell. And they did not want to share the money with Nevis. So Mr. Daniel decided they don't want to share the money with Nevis, that's fine. We will start our own housing corporation and make sure that we don't share our money with them as well. And so we had the Nevis Corporation, which has made a tremendous difference in this country. And then the Bank of Nova Scotia. All those organizations to take the country forward. As I wrap up, I want to just make 3 points. 1, it is important that we in the Caribbean begin to see the importance of Africa, of dealing business with Africa. We tend to look to the metropole. We tend to look to the United States of America and to London, etc. Nothing is going to happen there. Nothing is going to happen there. Big business ensures that they control and they continue to control. It's time that we begin to look to our brothers and sisters in Africa and see how we can work together to develop each other. It's absolutely important. I believe that it is important that we give emphasis to education. Briefly, people need to think. Children need to be taught to think, to analyze, to be creative, to be innovative. This foolishness of cramming their heads with all kinds of information, and when you go to do exams, you already know the question because the teachers have already told you the question. It's not helping anybody. You're passing 25 subjects, but you don't have the tools to take the country forward. I have been a graduate of the University of the West Indies. I have been exposed to the education, tertiary education in England. Totally different. Totally different. And I really wish that I had gone to an English university when I was at the right age. Because there is that difference, but you're taught to think. You're taught to solve problems, not just to cram and regurgitate. That is something that we need to look at. And the last point I want to make is technology. You have had the revolution in technology. You have all sorts of things happening. you can stay in Nevis and do things. We need to do something about it. We need to focus on the development of technology so that should be part of the curriculum, moving in a particular direction, robotics, etc., etc. Now, I apologize for taking up the time. I just wish to thank the government for allowing me to speak, to share with you a few ideas and try to paint a picture of what happened 40 years ago. I want to say to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, we have done great things together. We have come far. We have to now think what direction we are going to take, because we have to develop the country not for us anymore, but for the young people of this country. We have to guide them, we have to discipline them, we have to help them. But the important thing is we have to be there so that in the next 40 years, and I know I won't be alive then, the next 40 years will be a great difference in St. Kitts and Nevis, and that we can stand proud among the nations of the Caribbean and the nations of the world, if it pleases you.
Thank you.
I would now call our next dignitary, the Honorable Cleon Simmons, elected member in the Nevis Island Assembly, 2018 to present.
Thank you. Madam President, may it please you, I do apologize for my late appearance. I did send apologies, Madam President. I rise to make my contribution at this very special sitting of the Nevis Island Assembly on the occasion of our 40th anniversary as an independent nation. I salute our nation for attaining this milestone. Madam President, to put things into proper perspective and some context, I must state for the record that I am 40 years old. And so it is safe to say that my entire life has been spent in an independent St. Kitts and Nevis. Obviously, Madam President, I am not in a position to speak with authority as some of the speakers before me today. However, Madam President, my research has revealed that with the attainment of independence on September 19, 1983, Nevis was able, after 100 years, to have its own legislature, this very assembly that we now sit in, Madam President. Nevis also benefited through the birth of the Nevis Island Administration. You see, Madam President, these two institutions gave considerable power to Nevisians to chart the path forward for our beloved island. For example, the establishment of the Nevis Island Administration, Nevis was able to have its own ministers of government, permanent secretaries to head its various ministries, heads of department, and directors. To put it simply, Madam President, Nevisians became empowered because, Madam President, we had full autonomy. We were able to govern and manage, to some extent, our own affairs. Madam President, over the years, we have come to take certain administrative matters and privileges for granted. But, Madam President, there was a time in our history when Nevisians had to travel to Bastille for a birth certificate, a police record even. Just imagine that, Madam President. Such things, I am sure, all can agree that we are quite happy and elated that they are of the past. Madam President, it was because of the NIA that the government of the day on Nevis was able to bring the prestigious Four Seasons Resort in 1991, thus giving this island its first real payday and giving many women their first real payday. It is, perhaps, with some regret, that some may say, as the speaker before me, that through this empowerment of women, some male counterparts may have suffered. But, Madam President, we cannot regret the strides, particularly the economic strides that we have made in this little island through the establishment of the Four Seasons Resort. Sadly, Madam President, for more than 30 years later, Four Seasons remain the island's main payday entity. Perhaps, as we look beyond 40 years of independence, we ought to leave no stones unturned as we seek to bring another major mass employer to the shores of Nevis to drive the island's economy. Madam President, we are grateful for the strides that we have made as a small country in 40 years. Upon reflection, we must be grateful for being able to have access to running water in most of our households, almost all, perhaps all. Madam President, access to electricity, access to transportation, to the extent that almost every household has at least one family member who owns a vehicle. Access to technology, to the internet, access to the convenience and efficiency of banking service, access to health care. Although, Madam President, there is need for significant improvement, the completion of the new hospital wing is undeniably desirable for all Nevisians. Access to decent roads. We must admit, that we have come a long way from 2 strips or even lack of paved roads. Access to quality education. Madam President, I can go on and on and on, but in the interest of time, we must be thankful, we must be grateful that we have indeed come from far. But we cannot, Madam President, afford to relax now. We must continue to build solidly on the foundation that was laid before us by our forefathers. Madam President, we can all agree that the list for improvement is not exhaustive. However, I wish to focus on one aspect or one item on that list, and that is education. Because education, I believe, and perhaps you may agree, is the root or the pillar of any progressive nation. Madam President, the Nevis Sixth Form was established on the 13th day of October, 1980, 3 years before our nation attained its independence. Today, our Sixth Form's performance compares favorably with similar institutions in the Leeward Islands. However, the time has come for us to go beyond the arches of the Nevis Sixth Form. We must seek to establish our own technical and vocational college. The focus must be on the incorporation of technology to develop essential labor skills to make our people
more self-sufficient. Madam President, being able to provide comprehensive educational training is the gateway to success for Nevis. Our people must be empowered, as was done in the past, to build a solid economy on small business productivity. It is a necessary means to economic diversification to complement our tourism and financial service sectors. Madam President, as I close my brief presentation, I turn to the need for political maturity in our politics to assist us in our endeavors to continue to develop maturely. The constant cursing and mudslinging which characterized our politics in the 1980s, 90s, and to a large extent now must end. If it is that our society, one, accept certain level of maturity and responsibility from individuals when they attain the age of 40, shouldn't we as a people expect our politicians to be more mature and responsible in the way that we conduct ourselves? Yes, it is okay and perhaps desirable for politicians to disagree, but that should not mean that we become disagreeable and engage in character assassination. It shouldn't mean, Madam President, that because we differ politically, that we cannot have open and mature conversations or dialogue which will advance the national agenda. Madam President, I have made a conscious and deliberate decision that I want to see greater maturity in the politics here in Nevis, and by extension, the wider federation. Madam President, as we move beyond 40 years of independence in this country, I want to be a part of that change that will result in our politics and our politicians showing greater political maturity. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our future generations. Madam President, our constituents and the general public will be the wider judges. On that note, Madam President, I take this opportunity to congratulate and to salute our beloved nation on this, our 40th anniversary of independence. May it please you, Madam President.
I now invite our final dignitary, the Honorable Dr. Mark A.G. Brantley, Premier of Nevis, December 2017, to present.
Madam President, good morning. Still morning, good afternoon, I'm sorry. I rise to make a very brief intervention on this very auspicious occasion, which is a special sitting of the Nevis Island Assembly on the occasion of our 40th anniversary of independence. Madam President, let me start by, of course, recognizing Lady Sheila Daniel, who's in the gallery, and paying homage to the Honorable Joseph Parry, who would have been afforded the privilege to speak moments ago as a former Premier and leader of this island. Let me greet, of course, my colleagues on this side, my colleagues on the other side, and to say, Madam President, thank you to you and your team, thank you to the legal advisor for the work that went into making this possible. Indeed, I recall the legal advisor raising the matter with me and indicating it would be a good idea. and we agreed that it would be a good idea to have this sit-in. So thank you very much for accommodating us. The purpose of today was really not intended to be political, nor for us to engage in the usual back and forth. The purpose of today was really intended to celebrate our independence, where we have been and where we hope to go. The truth is that we have made giant strides in 40 years. And Madam President, the House and the people listening and those here in the gallery would have heard all of the strides. I need not go over well-trodden ground in saying from whence we have come. I believe that those of us who are at my age understand all that has been said, because many of us are old enough to have actually experienced it. I want our people to reflect, Madam President, on what I call the audacity of those who conceptualize that St. Kitts and Nevis of 104 square miles and roughly 50,000 souls could aspire to be an independent nation. In a world where we are continually told that we're too small, we must stay to the back, we must be quiet and sit down, we must pay homage to those who had the courage, and I will say it again, the audacity, to think that they could achieve this feat, and that they could, Madam President, stand with the other nations of the world, all of whom are bigger than us, with the exception of just, I believe, 2 or 3. And to represent the interests of our people. I reflect, as I speak, that the Honorable Prime Minister of our country and his team were just at the UN General Assembly in New York, standing on the same stage as the US President, the same stage as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the same stage as all the leaders of all the countries in the world, and speaking to the world on a world stage on behalf of these 50,000 souls that call St. Kitts and Nevis home. I believe, Madam President, that this is a remarkable achievement, that we have been engaged in a remarkable experiment in governance, in nationhood, and in progress. Has it been easy? Of course not. Have there been mistakes? Absolutely. Have we been forced to make sacrifices? Yes. But who among us could deny that in 40 years this country has grown in leaps and bounds from whence we were? And listen to all of the presentations. And I reflect that for those who are listening, and for those who may not know our history, some may feel that only some people contributed to the development of St. Kitts and Nevis. I want to say that that is not so. And that all of us who have had the privilege of serving within government, in other institutions, civil society, that all of us must be celebrated because all of us are making our contribution. We may debate whether that contribution is big or small, but all of us, Madam President, are making our contribution. And we cannot talk about the progress that we have seen in our country without, of course, referring to the father of Nevis, the Right Honorable, Right Excellent, Dr. Simeon Daniel, our national hero, without referring to the national heroes on St. Kitts, including on the Vision, Nathaniel France, without referring to all those who would have stood in this very house, a creature and construct of our Constitution. And those were Sir Simeon, who started it, the Honorable Vance Winkworth Amory of blessed memory, who continued, the Honorable Joseph Parry, that we've just heard of, and now I am here for such time as God will permit me to serve in this capacity. I believe that it is important for us to pay homage to all who would have served. because it is not right to suggest that somehow development started with some and then suddenly stopped, and then only restarted again and suddenly stopped. Development is a continuum, and each of us is making our contribution, and each and every contribution made to nationhood and to the development of St. Kitts and Nevis should be recognized and applauded, because I believe that it is important. No one man is an island. All of us must make our contribution to make this country what it is. A point was made, Madam President, as an indication of how far we've come, that we look around now in St. Kitts and Nevis, and more specifically our beloved island of Nevis, and we see a large non-national community. I would have recalled my father, blessed memory, telling me about the days when Nevisians left by any means possible. I attended a funeral recently of Mr. Bertram Roach, one of our centenarians who passed. And in the eulogy, they said to the church that he had stowed away in a boat to get to Trinidad. That's how desperate things used to be. That people would stow away in a boat to get to anywhere but Nevis. Here we are now, 40 years on. And people are doing anything to get to Nevis. And I believe that that speaks volumes to what we have achieved here, despite what you hear. Some of us, it appears, see the sun shining brightly and we're trying to convince the world that it is night outside. But here are people flocking to our shores with what they're coming for, hard life. People go where they perceive opportunity to be. That's why we went, and that's why people are now coming. And I don't think that anything speaks more eloquently to the progress we have made as a country than to see now others finding Nevis and St. Kitts to be their home, and to come here and say, let me leave my country and come here to look for opportunity in these fair lands of St. Kitts and Nevis. I believe, Madam President, that that point should not escape any of us. Because sometimes as we engage in the to and fro of our local and sometimes petty politics, we ignore the fact that we have come so far. We have come so far that people are now flocking from distant lands to find opportunity right here. I want to conclude because I don't want it to be said that I kept anyone here longer than necessary. To say, Madam President, that as we look forward to the next 40 years and hopefully beyond, I will echo the sentiments of my dear friend, the Honorable Spencer Brandon, member for number 1, that I'm optimistic, cautiously so, that I'll be here 40 years from now. Not here. Not here. Not in the house. But that I will be around 40 years from now. To see how much further we would have progressed. But I want to sound a word of warning to all of our people, Madam President, that we do not take this island and this country for granted. That we do not take the gains that we have made for granted. That we do not assume that aura of entitlement that some of us seem to have adopted. That we recognize that only through continued effort and continued commitment to nation building will we be able 40 years from now to say that this island and this country continue to progress from strength to strength. I therefore warn against complacency. I urge our people, particularly our young people, to gird their loins and understand that nothing comes without hard work and effort. I bemoan the fact, Madam President, that I see so many opportunities available in Nevis. Scholarships that are offered for free training, and nobody's applying. Jobs, and employers saying they can't get anybody to apply. Recently, an employer said to me he wants to bring in some workers from overseas, and I said, why? Because I attended recently the graduation of one of our secondary school institutions, and by my tally, I'm sure we had over 200 persons graduating. These are young people. And I said, well, how could we have so many people coming out of school, but you're telling me you need to import people? People aren't ready to apply. I had a conversation with a young woman, has a business. Said her worker left the job. And she asked why. The worker said she's at home living her best life. I don't say these things lightly, because those of us who are old enough understood that there was a time in Nevis when there was no payday. That's why people were stowing away in boats to get to Trinidad. That's why we went to Santo Domingo, to San Pedro de Macorís, and places like that to cut sugar cane. There was no payday in Nevis. And we have come to a point now where Nevisians are saying they don't want the payday that's available. Some may see it as progress, but I warn against complacency. I warn against complacency, because it is important in these next 40 years that our people, the Nevisian people, the Kittitian people, that they recognize that they must rise up and take the controlling heights of every aspect and every facet of our development. Our politics, our economy, our education system, our healthcare system, that it is for us to build our country. And we cannot achieve that if our people are so laid back, because life has become easy. They're so laid back that they prefer to live their best life at home than to work. That we must warn against and guard against complacency. Many nations rise during an era when things are hard. If I may be allowed just another minute or two, Madam President. I mentioned people stowing away to get to Trinidad. We had a whole generation of people who got on ships, the so-called Windrush generation, and left here, hot sun, or like now so, and get on a boat and went to England that they've only ever heard of. No idea about winter, no idea about how England operate, no idea about anything, and spent weeks on the ocean, going from island to island, picking up people with no knowledge of where they were going or what they were going to. No, that is a portrait in courage. That is the audacity that I'm talking about. And that is the blood that we have in our veins. These are not people who somehow jumped up overnight. These are people who had that spirit that makes us Nevisian and Kittitian. And I am saying that we must guard to ensure that we don't lose that spirit, Madam President. That courage, that audacity that comes from hope and comes from confidence in ourselves. Because you had to be confident in yourself to get on a ship to go to a place you don't know. Nowadays, you tell young people we have scholarships in Morocco, in Azerbaijan. They tell you that's too far. I'm not going there because that's too far. You said to them, but it's free. And you learn a foreign language. And you reflect on the difference in perspective of people who knew not where they were going but got on a ship here in hot sunny Nevis and traveled for weeks on the ocean to get to cold, wintry England. I've been to England, and Lord, even the summer it's cold. And that's what our forefathers went to. And brave those who went there, because others went elsewhere. We have a country today because of the foundation laid by those who were brave, who were strong. And we ourselves have now an obligation to ensure that the next generation and the generation after that never forgets the sacrifices that were made so that we can enjoy St. Kitts and Nevis that we enjoy today. Our country is not perfect. No country is. Our country has challenges. Every country does. But I am convinced, Madam President, with every fiber of my being, that this country, and more specifically this island of Nevis, will continue to rise and continue to prosper and continue to do well, and that our people will be the beneficiaries of that. But to protect it, our people have to ensure that they are not complacent, that they do not stay at home and expect that this is somehow guaranteed to them, but that they understand that we must work and work and work some more, that we must work together to achieve greatness for our island, prosperity for our people, and that we can ensure the longevity of St. Kitts and Nevis for another 40 years. I salute Sir Simeon Daniel, father of Nevis. I salute him because it is his vision that all of us are today benefiting from. I salute those who have come after him here in Nevis and those on St. Kitts. I salute them all because it is important that we recognize that each and every one has made their contribution. And that thread of contribution woven together, those various strands are what create the tapestry of a strong St. Kitts and Nevis. And so, Madam President, it lies now only for me to say happy independence to St. Kitts and Nevis. Happy 40th anniversary of independence. I'm happy that we've had this opportunity for this sitting and to have heard all the voices from opposition, from government, and from our previous Premier. The other two have gone to glory. It is important, therefore, that we have had some of the past, some of the present, and hopefully a glimpse into the future. Long live St. Kitts and Nevis. God bless St. Kitts and Nevis. God bless all of those who have served and who have laid the foundation for us. And may God give us now who are here the strength to carry on, the strength to work. And may our conduct be such that those who are coming after us are inspired to continue that rich tradition of hard work and that audacity of hope that has always defined the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. May it please you, Madam President.
I would like to thank our dignitaries for their brief remarks during this special sitting to mark the 40th anniversary of St. Kitts and Nevis's independence. Adjournment.
Madam President, I rise to move a motion for the adjournment of this Honorable House, sine die.
Madam President, I rise to second the motion.
Before we take the vote, just a reminder that we will proceed onto Main Street at the location of the bust of our national hero, where we will do a brief wreath-laying ceremony. So we invite you to join us there. And the question now before the House is that the House be adjourned. Sine die. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House stands adjourned. Sine die.